Ansareen, the question here is simply this. New scheme, there was no scheme of this kind earlier, and therefore, should the old, times where caste certificates were demanded, is it something that should continue in the Agniveer scheme?
So Navika, here is the problem. I think what might have happened is that, one thing which never ceases to surprise me is how these so-called representatives of the people, I shouldn't be saying so-called, because some of them are actually, or all of them are actually elected people. But, they pretend that they are seriously concerned about these questions, about the armed forces. But they are people who are prone to tilting at the windmills, because none of these people were aware of what the recruitment procedures were and what the recruitment criteria were until last year. Now suddenly one of these guys has suddenly seen something and started outraging, and then everybody, as often happens, a kind of a mob has been created to raise this controversy. Now this was the traditional practice. So there is nothing new in this. If there is anything new, it is that because now you're going in for a new scheme, which is an all India, all caste scheme, I don't think anybody should really take umbrage at it, although there are people within the armed forces who have certain questions about it, and I'll come to that in half a second. But since you are going in for a new scheme, perhaps you don't need a caste certificate anymore. Maybe the army has just, it is out of that reflex that the old requirements have been coming out in the new forms as well. That is one. The second issue is that Mr. Bhardwaj has waxed very eloquent on new scheme. Earlier it was for life. Does he know what was the average tenure for a Jawan in the Indian Army until last year? It was 15 years. Does he know until about a few years back, about 2 decades back, 3 decades back, the average age, tenure of a Jawan in the army was about 7 years. I don't know where these people, I myself have questions, and I've spoken to many officers who have raised very valid questions on whether a 4-year tenure is enough or not. Maybe it can be 5, maybe it can be 6, maybe it can be 7. But on the broad framework of the scheme, there are nobody, even in the armed forces, even people who have questions over this scheme, is in disagreement. Now, would it not be better for the lawmakers and representatives of the people to actually educate themselves, to actually talk to serving officers or some retired officers and get a better idea before they come and they start waxing eloquent? Now, there could be another reason why this caste certificate thing is still being carried out, maybe for another few years until the transition takes place, because you still have some regiments which are basically class and caste based regiments, like the Jat, the Mahar, the Sikh regiment, the Sikh Lai, the Jack Lai infantry, the Gurkhas, for example. Now, if you have these certificates and you are recruiting people, it is quite possible that for some more years you will, if you are recruiting people from a particular caste or a particular class, you might send them to those particular infantry units. I am not aware of what exactly the army scheme is, but I think it is a possibility that this transition period is taken care of. Now, members of parliament have all the right to raise questions, and they should. In fact, we make for a better policy if they raise questions. But to create this kind of breast beating about this whole thing is something which is not only unseemly, but quite unnecessary in my view.